Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. And grace my fears relieved. And grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear. How precious did that grace appear. The hour I first believed. The hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils and snares. Through many dangers, toils and snares. We have already come. We have already safe thus far. 'Tis grace that leads me safe thus far, and grace will lead us home, and grace will lead us home. When we've been here 10,000 years, when we've been here 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, bright shining as the sun. No less days to sing God's praise. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. And when we first begun. Hallelujah.
And he said the family got 6 bottles of
Come with me, I'll introduce you to some of my friends.
This is a song I wrote way up in the boonies of Maine many years ago. It's called Feel the Love, and I can see some people hugging right there, so you just turn to someone next to you and feel the love. Give them a hug. Give them a handshake. Feel the love that's all around. A chain of hearts spins round and round. Mother Earth and Father Sky, we live, we love, we learn, we die. Feel the love that's all around. A sacred circle we are bound to Mother Earth and Father Sky. We walk, we run, we dream, we fly. You can echo my voice. Feel the love, feel the love, feel the love, feel the love. And together it rises above. Feel the love, feel the love, feel the love, feel the love. It rises above. Feel the love. Feel the love. Feel the love. Feel the love.
We have no electricity or water, but it's okay.
Feel the love that's all around. A chain of hearts spins round and round on Mother Earth and Father Sky. We live, we love, we learn, we die. Feel the love that's all around. A sacred circle we are bound to Mother Earth and Father Sky. We walk, we run, we dream, we fly. Feel the love, feel the love, feel the love. You sing, feel the love. It rises above. Feel the love, feel the love, feel the love, feel the love. Everyone, it rises above. Feel the love.
I think it's a little early to talk about that.
Feel the love. Feel the love.
Hey!
How are you? It's good to meet you. They know me. If you need anything, thank you so much.
So this is Luis. What's your last name? Valentino. And his
To worry, cause worry is useless and useless in times like these. Won't be made useless.
we got a connection.
Won't be idle with despair. I'll gather my faith around my life. For the light does the darkness most fear. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours, they are my own. And they're not yours, they are my own. And we are never broken.
I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as you can communicate. 4 years ago. You'll be fine, you're going to be great, I'm telling you.
poverty stole your golden shoe. But it did not steal your laughter. When heartache came to visit me, I knew it wasn't ever after. We'll fight out of spite. Someone must stand up for what's right. But where there's a man who has no voice, there I shall go singing. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours, they are my own. They're not yours, they are my own, and we are never broken. In the end, only kindness matters. In the end, only kindness matters. In the end, sing that with me. Only kindness matters. In the end, only kindness matters. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours, they are my own. Not yours, they are my own, and we are never broken. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours, they are my own, and they're not yours, they are my own, and we are never broken. We are never broken. Thank you, everyone.
That was great, Donna.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then we could just do one there.
We're waiting for a few more of our speakers to come, so we're just going to have a little bit more music, and then we'll start in about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe more like 5 minutes.
Yeah, no. All right, you guys. You want a little spiritual aerobics? All you have to do is put your hands up when you hear the word sky, okay? I usually play this with a guitar, so I have to figure out how to do it on piano. Okay. I think I'll do it. We're all a family under one sky. We're a family under one sky, yeah. We're all a family under one sky. We're a family under one sky. That's right. Now I want you to echo me. We're Americans. Yeah, you can leave out the where are and just say Americans. We're Americans, Americans, and Russians, Chinese, and Africans too. We're Lebanese, and French, Mexicans, and Puerto Ricans. That's right. We're all a family under one sky. We're a family under one sky. Yeah. We're all a family under one sky. We're a family under one sky. All right. Who else are we? We're. What's your name? All right. We're Bostonians. Cape Verdeans. Yeah. Who else are we? Native Americans. Who else? And British too. Yeah, and British too. We're Ukrainians and Bosnians. Cape Codders. And one more. Hungarians too. Yeah, we're singing with me. We're all a family under one sky. We're a family under one sky. Woo! We're all a family under one sky. We're a family under one sky. Woo! You're welcome.
Okay, a big round of applause for Donna. Thank you so much for the music. We appreciate it. All right, I'm so excited to see everyone here. This is a beautiful group. Welcome to all of you. My name is Rita Davis, and thanks. I'm one of the leaders of Engage Falmouth, but we have many co-sponsors here, and so I wanted to make sure to thank the co-sponsors, and I want to make sure I didn't leave anyone out, so I even wrote a list, and I never read from a list. First is No Place for Hate. So thank you, No Place for Hate, for getting the word out and coming. We also have the Cape Verdean Club. They're right here up front. Very happy to have them on board. I'm Cape Verdean, as a lot of you know, so near and dear to my heart. The Falmouth Racial Justice League is here. They're a little more undercover of a group. They do their work at night when they see the little bat sign up on the wall. We have the Coalition for Social Justice. And Engage Falmouth, certainly. And also I want to say thank you to the Falmouth Police for coming. I spoke personally with Chief Dunn on Friday morning, and he knows that he's here to keep us safe. We really appreciate their presence here. We had a really frank conversation, and I have to say I'm very impressed, and I feel very lucky to have this police force in Falmouth. Let's see, we're going to go over some logistics of what you can expect for today. As I said, the police are here, but they're here to protect us. They're not worried about breaking up this event. We did everything by the book. We had to pay to have the electricity turned on, so they wouldn't have us if it weren't allowed. We also have peacekeepers here. You may see some people with orange bandanas, either around their necks or wearing them on their heads somehow. It's because when we talk about race, a lot of times things get very emotional and people can get worked up, and we want to make sure that they can de-escalate any rising tensions that may happen in the group. So they're trained by the Quakers, and peacekeeping is a non-violent way of intervening without causing any kind of stress or trouble. So distraction or just keep everybody calm. There's no physical interaction. But I'm very glad that we have trained peacekeepers here. So the Coalition for Social Justice has some people here in the crowd collecting signatures for the Fight for 15. And that's the fight to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour because it's far too low and no one can afford to live under those conditions. They have to work several jobs. So that's why people are bugging you for your John Hancock right now. And there are 2 tables where you can go over and find some more information about that. So Sandy, who is part of the Coalition for Social Justice, she'll come up later in the program and talk to you a bit more about this and why it's important. The other bit of logistical information is that we have Engage Falmouth t-shirts for sale for the very first time. And how much are they? They're $20 for the t-shirts. So if you want one, go and see beautiful Lauren in the hat there, and she will hook you up. Let's see, let me go through the order of events. We will have first, No Place for Hate will come up and tell us about what they do here in the community to try to bridge gaps over, cultural differences, because it's what makes our lives more interesting, what makes things more unique is that we can share our experiences. And then we'll start with personal testimonies. We've asked people to keep their thoughts to about 5 minutes, but just to tell us a little bit about what their experiences are like as a person of color here in this community. I can't tell you how many interactions I've had with people who say, we're so lucky to live here, it's a blue bubble, everyone is so liberal, and there aren't any problems like there are in the South or like there are in those big cities. When I personally have had very painful interactions over race living here. I live in West Falmouth, and I tell people that living in West Falmouth is a political act. And it's funny, But what's also funny is that when I tell people I live in West Falmouth, they almost always correct me immediately, and they say, "Oh, you mean East Falmouth, right? You live in East Falmouth." And I say, "No, I live in West Falmouth," and that's what I meant. And one woman even went so far as to ask me, like, "Oh, are you staying at the Emerson House?" Because she couldn't understand how someone with brown skin could be living in West Falmouth. That's the least emotional of the stories that I have that are like that. But this is the kind of thing that happens here on a regular basis. So I know that these might be hard stories to hear for a lot of people, but also please keep in mind that they're hard stories to tell. So please show your respect to the folks who are sharing their point of view. Understand that it's very emotional and painful for them too. And just try to keep an open heart and an open mind, even if what you're hearing isn't what you're used to or what you expect. And because this is kind of an emotional, because people are going to be honest, right? So it's going to be a little bit difficult. We've decided to use a singing bowl. So here's how it's going to go. Someone comes up, they share their 5-minute personal testimony, and we listen and we applaud as a thank you for sharing this difficult thing. And then, almost like a palate cleanser or a way to kind of refresh and be ready for the next person who speak, we have a singing bowl. So I'll ring the bowl gently at first so you know it's coming. You don't want to scare anyone. And just take a minute to breathe in and breathe out, and then we'll welcome the next person. And I think it'll give a good chance to kind of reset where we are emotionally. So let's practice one more time. Or let's practice. We didn't practice at all. So I'm going to ring the bell, and then we can take a deep breath in and just even listen to the texture of your breath and breathe out. Okay, kind of like settles the energy a little bit. I know it's kind of, it works. And the last thing I want to say, if any of you read in the paper what the plan was for today, we really did mean to end with a live stream broadcast of an ACLU voting rights campaign. It's like Let the People Vote. And it's online, and people all across the nation are going to be watching it. I think it's at 7:30. And we couldn't get the space. So the public library is closed on Sundays. We tried a whole bunch of different things, and up until even like this morning, quite frankly, we were trying really hard to find a place to watch this. So I encourage any of you to watch it on your own at home. I'm sure it'll be rebroadcast as well. It's the ACLU effort to get voting rights out to people, because this is another huge place in which racial discrimination has been a really crippling impact on people of color. So that would be useful. Okay, so now I think those are all of my announcements. Okay, now I would like to invite Pamela Rothstein to the mic so she can speak to us a little bit about No Place for Hate and the good work they're doing in our community. Please welcome.
Thank you. Before I start, I encourage you to take a second, turn around, and look at this great crowd. Community is a fragile thing, all too fragile, and we are very lucky to be here together, forming a community of diversity and respect, and to build that where we live. I created this sign from our logo, No Place for Hate, and added the words, "No, now more than ever." Unfortunately, I made this a while ago, and it is still relevant, all the more so. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor, scholar, said, "The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference." No Place for Hate was formed about 20 years ago, after even the work of a diversity group within Falmouth. In the No Place for Hate, which was under the auspices of the Anti-Defamation League, was formed as the result of an anti-Semitic incident when a swastika was painted on a house in Woods Hole. And diverse members of the community came together to say, this is not acceptable, we will not allow it, and we will combat it. And since then, first under the wonderful, capable, and inspiring leadership of George Spivey, then under Bob Murphy, and currently under a steering committee with a very large group of supporters and people who are active. No Place for Hate continues to try to build bridges and partnerships in our community, to stand up and be vocal against bias of any sort, against any person, and to be a place where people can, with respect and honesty, and sometimes with difficulty, share their experience and open their hearts and their minds to other people's experiences. It's just encapsulated in an organization that does ongoing work, which is what we're trying to do here today. So I won't say anything more other than the voices that we're going to hear and the voices that are going to be shared are so very important. And that's the kind of work that No Place for Hate intends to continue doing. We encourage you to look us up on Facebook, write to us, speak with us, and we will continue with educational work and community building work to make this the community we want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I'd also like to thank Congressman Keating, who has come, and Dylan Fernandez, our state representative. And I know Megan English Braga is here in the crowd. There might be others who I haven't seen yet. Apologize for not mentioning your names. Okay, so our first speaker, her name is Aisha, and I met her at an open mosque day in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And she has come from Dartmouth to share a little bit with us, and I'm really excited. So please help me welcome Aisha.
Hi, my name is Aisha Karubi, and I actually live in New Bedford, but I recently graduated from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Thank you. So I came here today to share my story because I think a lot of people in the United States, and especially in more liberal states like Massachusetts, try to hide racism or Islamophobia and, kind of just brush it under the rug. But it exists, and we need to acknowledge that this exists and it's a problem. As you can tell, I am outwardly a Muslim woman. I dress like a Muslim. I cover my head. I wear loose clothing, modest clothing. This serves two purposes for me. It's very spiritual. I want to incorporate modesty as a characteristic. I wear it outwardly so that hopefully it will enter my heart inwardly. But also, the second reason I wear this is it's a political statement for me. And I'm a feminist, and for me, this is me claiming my sexuality. And it empowers me. So this is how I view myself, and this part of my identity is extremely important to me. And it saddens me that when I walk through the streets, sometimes I don't feel safe representing my faith, but also representing my femininity and my feminism. And I do want to share a story that happened to me in New Bedford. It happened about a year ago. My sister and I, she was pregnant, 8 months pregnant, and she also covers like me. She actually covers her face, and I want to demonstrate it so that people become familiar with this. So she covers her face like this, and me and her were walking through the park, and a man, he was in his car and he was driving by. He stopped his car in the middle of the road and he started screaming very loudly at me and her. He started screaming profanity and asking, "What is that?" He didn't even say, "What is she?" He referred to us as that. "What is that? What is it?" And he used very, very offensive, horrible language. And it was aggressive. It was scary, especially as two women who were just walking, minding our own business, and my sister was pregnant. And since then, I became very, very scared to walk alone or even just to walk with me and my sister. So this does exist. I mean, there are other incidences, but this was the most aggressive incident that I have ever faced. And we need to put a stop to this. And I do want to say that if you know, apathy, just not being involved. Nobody stood up for us. Nobody said, hey, excuse me, sir, that's extremely, stop that, don't do that. There were many people standing around and they didn't intervene. And that is just as bad as the violence and the aggression. If you don't speak up and stand up for other people, this makes it okay. And it's not okay. It's not okay to express aggression against another person. It's not okay to hate people and to outwardly hate it. We need to be building bridges. So please do learn from my experience and speak up. Don't be apathetic. Don't ignore it. Don't just feel like it's wrong in your heart. Say something. Speak up against it and say, no, this is wrong. Stop that. Thank you very much for hearing my story. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Aisha. Our next speaker is Jeffrey Oppenheim. Please welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Oppenheim, obviously not a person of color. But I've been asked to speak about the impact of anti-Semitism on me and my family. I'll also touch upon how my personal and family experience may be viewed against the upsurge of anti-Semitism currently in communities across the country. I'm a first-generation American, the son of 2 German Jewish immigrants to this country. My parents came as teenagers with their parents and siblings to escape from the Nazis. My father's family was from Nuremberg in the south of Germany, the hotbed of Nazism, so his nuclear family left intact in early 1938. But only after my father and uncle were barred from public school, my grandfather's business was confiscated, and their savings went to the Third Reich. They left my great-grandmother in the care of a good nursing home because she was not well enough to come to this country. We learned decades later that she had been euthanized by the Nazis, along with other physically and mentally disabled Jews and Gentiles. My mother's family was from a small farming community in northern Germany. The seriousness of the political situation came crashing in on them on November 9th, 1938, which some of you may know as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. On that night, the Nazis stormed into my grandparents' home. They dragged my grandfather to the small synagogue with all the other Jewish men in town. After they desecrated the synagogue, the Nazis demanded the Jewish men destroy the Torah scroll, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. My grandfather, as the lay leader of the congregation, was first in line. He refused to do so, despite relentless beatings. The other men followed his lead and suffered severe beatings as well. One of the men was thrown off the roof of the synagogue. The Nazis finally relented, and my grandfather dragged himself home, weighted down by the heavy Torah scroll. The ground floor of his home had been trashed, but fortunately they did not go upstairs where my grandmother and her 4 children were hiding, traumatized with fear. My mother's family had to split up to come to this country. The oldest daughter, 15 years old, came alone to the United States and stayed with a relative. A few months later, my grandfather left for America, hoping to raise enough money for an affidavit to bring his wife and 3 remaining children to this country. The United States was in its isolationist phase, coming out of the Great Depression, and anti-Semitism was rampant. When war broke out in Europe, a month after my grandfather had left Germany, his wife and 3 children were alone in a country that hated Jews. They lived in constant fear. They were not allowed in the air raid shelter. All of their money was confiscated. They managed, against all odds, to obtain a visa in January of 1940, and my grandmother booked passage on one of the last ships to make the Atlantic crossing during wartime. You can imagine how my 89-year-old mother felt on August 11th and 12th this year, 2017, when she turned on the news from Charlottesville, Virginia. She saw neo-Nazis and members of the KKK marching with torches like the Nazis did in the 1930s and 40s to intimidate people, specifically to intimidate Jews. They were chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and brandishing signs that said Jews are Satan's children. They were doing the Sieg Heil salute. They stopped in front of Congregation Beth Israel of Charlottesville, the only Jewish congregation in Charlottesville. They called for police protection during their Sabbath service. But there really was, at that point, no violation of law. So the police did not come. Several neo-Nazis with semi-automatic rifles stood for 30 minutes across the street from the synagogue, chanting. A 30-year Navy veteran, a Gentile man, stood in front of the synagogue with the rabbi. When the services concluded, the rabbi feared for the safety of his congregants and their Gentile guests and sent them out the back door to avoid confrontation with the gangs of skinheads. The rabbi feared an attack on the synagogue and removed the Torah scrolls, including a Holocaust scroll. This happened in our country 7 weeks ago. I have not experienced anti-Semitism on the scale of my parents' and grandparents' generation, but anti-Semitism clearly persists. There has been an 86% spike in anti-Semitic incidents in the first 3 months of 2017. A few examples of my own experience are swastikas painted on the Falmouth Jewish congregation sign, also painted on the back wall of a printing business here in Falmouth, about a half a mile down the road, owned by a Jewish family. Clients talking about Jewing down someone in the course of negotiation. Being denied as a young, inexperienced attorney the opportunity to speak in Superior Court on behalf of a client before a judge, who I later learned was not a known anti-Semite. Confronting a fellow town meeting member a couple of years ago who was heard to have said something anti-Semitic about a colleague of mine who made a presentation at our town meeting, our democratic form of town government. I had occasion to hire a caterer for a large celebration at our congregation, and he made an anti-Semitic statement during the course of the evening. Frankly, I'm still assessing the impact of my family's experience on my life. I do know the impact has been profound. Even though the prejudices were suffered by my parents and grandparents, I tried to use my background to benefit our Jewish community by being one of the founders and the former president of the Falmouth Jewish Congregation. I've also tried to help our broader community by serving on boards of a variety of other nonprofit organizations. We live in a wonderful but imperfect community. It's vitally important that we all stay vigilant. Let us not be silent in the face of racial bigotry and anti-Semitism. Let us strive to understand each other and seek justice for all. Democracy dies in the shadows, in the darkness. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Our next speaker is Luis Valentino, whose name I may be pronouncing wrong, sorry. He's from Puerto Rico, but he lives here in Falmouth and he works at Hui. Please welcome.
Okay. Hi, yes, right, it's Luis Valentino. Yeah, I would like to share our story from Puerto Rico, as you know, about the Hurricane Maria. And it's a very difficult situation right now down there. The news are saying something, but the reality is other. After a week, I heard from my family, and what they're saying is, I can't believe what's happening right now down there. Like, when she told me that they are receiving basically 6 bottles of water per family, and the food is sprinkled chips and things like that, I said, what is going on down there? And situation is San Juan, Mayagüez, and other towns of the island. Yeah, there are big cities, and the help is down there. But the small towns, they're not getting what they need. And I said to them, I will help, but I can't alone. So all together, we can rebuild Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is La Isla del Encanto, and we'll be back La Isla del Encanto. We are going to help. We are going to rebuild the island again. There is a 3.5 millions of people down there, brothers and sisters, having a very difficult time. There is no power. There is not enough water. And I read in the news that only 16 people die because of the water, but that is not true. It's over 100 people that have dead because of water. And I came here to work at Hui with a dream. I'm first generation student in my family, and so I'm trying to help them. But when I received the news, I was feeling handless. I have receiving messages from a lot of people. We want to help, but I was saying I don't know how, because the post office is not working, FedEx is not working, Walmart is not working. How we can help? And I feel handless. But after I talk to many people, now I feel like we have the support and we can rebuild the island. So we are going to have a safe place event to benefit people on Puerto Rico. The date to be announced, but we'll be in the Wacoit church, and we are going to help them. So it's not about just my family, it's about the entire island. And please target small towns. The big cities are okay, but small towns, they need help, and they need water. Babies, they need formula. There is a lot they need. There is the president says something, but no, that's not the reality. So thank you so much. And if you need more information, I have pictures, and I have organizations that you can contact. Just I will be around. So just ask me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis. So the Safe Plates will kick off a much longer-term effort to try to help out Puerto Rico long-term. Now, a lot of you know Nell Fields over at the Wacoit Congregational Church. She's taking the lead on this and is really excited. We're trying to work with maybe some of our elected officials and see if we can get help to people who need help, because they are fellow Americans and we need to take care of our own. Okay, I'm going to ring the bell again. Our next speaker is Shawnee Turner. Please welcome Shawnee Turner.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, this is a touchy subject for me. I'm coming as a mother in representation of my daughter, who was labeled within Panera Bread Company in Mashpee, where she was told that the soup she was serving was called nigger bean soup. I come to you humbly because as a mother, how do you save your daughter from shame within a workplace? How do you save your child from being demoralized and called disgusting and taunted within a workplace? She went to work at 7 a.m. and any parent of a teenager knows you cannot get your child to work at 7 a.m. But she walked to work. She took a half an hour walk to work, walked in, and her first customer of the day, she was taunted from then on. And she calls me crying and screaming, why are they hurting me? Why are they calling me these names? What did I do to have somebody treat me this way? She's 17. We see these pictures of what happens with the standoffs in the civil rights movement. We see these pictures of adults being taunted this way. Well, what if it was your child? How do you protect your child when you assume that they're in a location where they're being taught job skills, they're being encouraged to make themselves, provide for a better life within themselves? So she breaks down and she says, what can I do, Mom? They're screaming at me. They hit me. They threw my stuff in the trash. What do I do? My first thought is, I'm coming right now. Don't move, I'm coming. You have a safe place within me. But I come to you as a community to say, this person still works there, and it's okay. She feels as if she has accomplished nothing, and that how she was treated was okay. She has received emails, calls, taunting her, telling them they will now go to this restaurant because what they term this soup is okay. She's 17. How do I protect my child at that point? And these are the feelings I'm feeling within myself because I went to my local PD for support. I went to my community for support, and I have to say thank you because my community came out and supported my child, and they supported me. We put it in the paper. I've had calls of people contacting the National Panera Bread Company and telling them this is not a place. Cape Cod is not that community. So I have to say to you, thank you for helping me encourage my child so she can see she has support not only within her home, but within her community. So I clap to you and say thank you for that issue. We are still fighting to this day because she was terminated wrongly. I'm still working with her to this day because I want you to understand, as a child, she is still trying to think of what can I do to better myself. And I've been explaining to her, you have done nothing wrong. There's nothing that you can do to better yourself, but to continue to strive and help others to see that you are better than what they have made you. You are not a simple name of a soup, but you are a 17-year-old child that has progressed in life, that is going to make it in life, and it's okay. You will continue to fight for your friends and your family to make sure that they know that what has been done to you will not happen to the next person. So I come to you humbly, in some tears. I'm trying to fight them back, but if you're a parent, you have to understand how I feel. It's hard. It is truly hard to feel this way. But I have to say again, thank you for your continued support for her. She's still seeking help, but thank you as a single mother who's supporting her child. I thank you again.
As I said earlier, I know some of these stories are hard to hear, and it might be difficult to not be able to respond. We're asking that you keep this space for listening, but we do have this corkboard being manned over here by by Gwyneth right now, where if you feel like you want to just say something and you feel like it's really hard for you to hold back, even if it's, I'm sorry this happened to you, or whatever you're feeling in your heart, there are markers and piece of paper, and you can just pin it up to the corkboard, because we know sometimes you need a space to release and to feel like it's too much to take in. Okay, we will have Ron Clark will be our next speaker, but first I'm going to chime the bowl. Yes, thank you, Erica. Please welcome Ron Clark, who is the head of the Concerned Black Men of Cape Cod.
Good afternoon. I want to share with you some of the experiences I've had, and of course, if you're from Falmouth, and you know we have the same problems the rest of the country has: drugs, teenage pregnancies, and also white supremacy. It came to my attention in something so simple as our annual Christmas parade. The Kung Fu school that I was a part of was part of the parade, and we had a lot of youngsters in the parade, and one of the co-owners of the school was an African-American man. The other was an Asian American woman. After the parade, the African-American man got a threatening phone call from the Ku Klux Klan here on Cape Cod. That got my attention. And from that point on, we began to realize that things are not always as they seem. I had one very, very minor incident with the Falmouth police in which a young officer found it difficult to accept a family of color living in a relatively affluent neighborhood, and continued to refer to my father as the handyman because he went next door to move something for a neighbor. And I intervened and said, no, we're neighbors. And he continued to say handyman. And I said, no, neighbors. Finally, he accepted that. Now, I must also say, you have a complaint, but also give credit where it's due. The Falmouth Police Department is overwhelmingly, in my experience, been a very positive organization. An incident I had, my car, the battery went on my car and I stopped. Falmouth PD, an officer came up and tried to help me. I said, the battery's dead. He said, well, I can't give you a boost with my patrol car because it'll knock out the electronics. But he went home, got his own private battery charger, and came back and gave me a boost. And that's over and above the call of duty, and I appreciate that. But the problems that we're having are, there's basically, at their source, white supremacy. And we may as well call it what it is, white supremacy. And I'm going to share something with all of you that I hope may be of benefit to you because it opened my eyes. I was at a party as the invited guest of an individual who was a tall, platinum blonde-haired, blue-eyed ex-special ops officer. And two white men came to the party, and immediately resented my presence there. And I heard them try to involve the other men in resenting my presence, and I went to confront that. And the host held out his hand and said, I will handle this. And he said, first of all, I am not white. And I was shocked because the man had, see, blonde hair and blue eyes. He said, white is what you had in Nazi Germany. White is what you had in South Africa. White is what you have in some parts of the USA. I'm not white, I'm Scandinavian, he said. We may look alike, but we do not think alike. And for the first time in my life, I realized the diabolically clever propaganda that has been used on Americans to make you believe that the white man is a physical description. It is not. It is an ideological description. I can safely say there are very few, if any, white people here at this gathering. We are all children of God. And I want to conclude by quoting something from Reverend Martin Luther King. Brother Martin said many things that were inspiring. This statement was not covered very often, but it has great impact. He said, white supremacy is dead. The only question is how expensive they want to make the funeral. Thank you very much.
I'm very short. Our last testimony will be given by Manasa, who I only know by first name. Manasa Johansson, correct? Please welcome.
On being a black woman on Cape Cod. Some people have asked me the question, what it is like to be a black woman on Cape Cod in 2017. For them, and to anyone else who might want to try to understand, here are my answers. I cannot get a job in my field, despite my degrees and my qualifications, because I have a non-conventional cultural background. My name sounds way too foreign, and I do not fit in the Cape white landscape. I am most often the only dark-skinned person in a gathering. The Cape is not an easy place to live for young families or young professionals, let alone for people of color. I have friends who are loyal fans and supporters of the current president. Not surprisingly, they have not talked to me much since election night, especially not within the last few months. I sent my husband to deal with most transactions. You know why? Because as a white male, he will not be judged. He will not be scrutinized, and his motives will not be questioned. It just is easier that way. I sent him. But let's be clear, my views and my perspectives on race relations have dramatically evolved over the years. I arrived on the Cape 10 years ago, almost. I first moved here as an immigrant. I was new to the local culture, and I was completely baffled by the discrimination and the judgment I faced solely based on my origin and the complexion of my skin. So without much power in my hands and with no job, my only option was to move away. I returned and eventually obtained my permanent residency. I started to understand the dynamics of the society a lot better and where I fit in, but most importantly, where I did not fit in. In 2015, I obtained my US citizenship, and at that point, I was fully part of the system. I refused to be a simple spectator or a victim. I refused to let racism and the negativity affect my life. I am determined to keep bringing positive changes in our society every single day, one action at a time. Back in January, I wrote a letter to the newspaper about racial biases in our town. The responses I got have been overwhelmingly positive and a real eye-opener. It turns out that most white people actually do not know much about the discrimination that Black people face on an everyday basis. So to some extent, we have opened the door to more discussions on the issue. But the chapter is not over. No, on the contrary, it seems as though America has become even more divided lately. With a president who openly promotes racist views, racism is now becoming the new normal. The arrival of a populist, nationalist, white supremacist-supported head of state has undone much of the progress made by the civil rights movement. We might disagree on policies, but to despise and to hate someone solely based on their language, their culture, the color of their skin, are way below the standards of simple human decency. We as humanity are facing intense challenges, from feeding the 7 billion people inhabiting this planet, to tackling environmental disasters, to eradicating diseases, even to stopping an imminent nuclear war. So here's my question today. Why are we still stuck on the questions of skin color and origin? Thank you.
Okay, first, a big round of applause for everyone who is brave enough to share their experiences. Thank you so much. One last ring of the bell, and then we will proceed with the rest of the program. Okay, one of the things I love about this community, in addition to all of these groups like No Place for Hate and the Coalition for Social Justice, is the ethnic diversity. It doesn't always get seen. It's here, sometimes it feels invisible, but there are, as I mentioned before, our Cape Verdean contingent who's here up front, and they're a huge part of the history of this town. They've been here for generations and generations. We can't forget that. The Wampanoag tribe, who we had reached out to and hoped to have a speaker, but unfortunately she couldn't make it. That's a big part of our community. We have Brazilian, we have Jamaican, we have Asian, we have Muslim, we have Jewish. There are even Sika here in Falmouth. I'm friends with them. So I am, and they're wonderful people, and it's what makes us different is what makes life so interesting. Even people with different political views. I don't want everyone to think exactly the same way I do. It would be a very boring place. So let's take some hope in that we have the infrastructure here. We have a supportive police force. We have community organizers who are here to try to make a difference. We do have the diversity, so let's work together and celebrate it. The next person I would like to bring up to the mic is Sandy Silva. Sandy, are you here? Where are you? She's probably collecting signatures. She's going to talk to you a little bit about why the fight for 15 is so important. And she's short like me.
Hi, my name is Sandy Feynman Silva. I'll claim my ancestral heritage too, and my adopted heritage. But I am a member of the Coalition for Social Justice, and what I'm just wanted to talk to you about is how economic justice is a racial justice issue. That economic inequality has long been a part of the systematic oppression of people of color, not only in our country, in the U.S., but globally. Without a fair living wage, we will not end oppression, exploitation, racism, or hatred endemic to our racially stratified nation. Wage exploitation is fundamentally about human worth and dignity. And low wages signal that I am not worth more. My work is not worth more. And it's okay to exploit me as a low-wage worker. This is the race to the bottom in wages and in race relations. Race and ethnic-based economic inequality did not start in the 20th century. Black people, former slaves, have systematically been denied access to basic resources, land, the means to create wealth through fairly paid work, and even the basic right to work for wages at all as slaves that could create long-term equity in the family, long-term family wealth. Wealth brings power and prestige, the power to participate in decision-making, the power to stand and sit at the table as an equal. And poor people are denied both that power and prestige. Since emancipation, African Americans could not amass wealth in this country. So their children and grandchildren have not benefited from inheritance in land or in money, in being able to pass on wealth to their children like my parents did. And so many other white families have. And that would all help them prosper and move to the middle class and even to wealth. In the U.S., we claim we're all equal, but as we know, this is a fiction. We inhabit a racially and class stratified society, no less so than Latin America, Africa, and so many other neocolonial regions of the world. Let's think about it, folks. Low wages in our racially stratified economy perpetuate social class inequalities based on race that we see today. Brown people, immigrants, Hispanic, Latinos, Native Americans also have been systematically denied access to fair and living wages. And their labor creates surplus value to the owners of their labor in a segment, what we call a segmented workforce between rich and poor, and that they participate in the agricultural sector, domestic service, restaurant work, in the healthcare industry, and many other sectors of our economy that pay low and inadequate wages. The value of their labor, like so many poor people, goes to the boss, to the owner, to the manager, and not to the workers, leaving them in misery and poverty. Today, black and brown economic inequality is additionally complicated by a government that thrives on terrorizing immigrants and people of color through deportations, police brutality, dangerous and extreme gun laws that put guns in the hands of extremists, racists, the KKK, militia groups, and hate mongers who aim to maintain the status quo of racial and class inequality. Just a second. Okay. Economic inequality is felt by black and brown people, and even more so by women of color, who are particularly exploited by low wages. Here are some of the statistics. African American men in 2015 earned on average $15 an hour, compared to white men who earned $21 an hour. White women earned $17 an hour, while Hispanic men earned even less, with men averaging $14 an hour and Hispanic women averaging $12 an hour. This is the racial class system in operation. Low wages are felt in many ways: inadequate housing, poor nutrition and health, less access to prenatal care, lower life expectancy. Economic justice brings racial justice, plain and simple. Until we acknowledge that our capitalist economy exploits too many people, women, people of color, the white working class, all low-wage workers, we will not address the inherent racism in our exploitative economic system. And we already have heard there are 2 ballot questions that were circulating today. One is the fight for a $15 minimum wage, and the other is the fight for paid family and medical leave. These will take us closer to economic justice in Massachusetts for all workers in our state. At a time when the federal government does nothing to improve our wages and working conditions, with the federal wage still at $7.25 an hour. The $15 ballot question proposes to raise the wage, now at $11 an hour, by $1 an hour for the next 4 years, beginning in 2019 to 2022. And if you don't know why it's worth having a $15 minimum wage, it will impact more than 1 million workers in our state, 90% of whom are 20 years of age or older. 56% are women, 24% are working parents, and 55% work full-time. It's time for a $15 minimum wage in Massachusetts and in the rest of the country. The second ballot question aims to create a paid family and medical leave trust fund, so full-time workers will have a safety net when they must take extended leave for a medical crisis for themselves or for family members. Employers will be required to make small weekly contributions which can be shared 50-50 with their workers. These 2 ballot questions will bring our state closer to providing benefits that all advanced industrial societies worldwide already provide. People are circulating today, as many of you already know. We have the petitions here, so we ask you to find the tables and make sure you sign a paper from the town where you live, and we thank you for listening. Peace.
You in West Barnstable Church, and she has an impressive CV, but I'm just going to bring her up because we all want to hear her speak. So please help me welcome.
So to my brothers and sisters who are willing to be vulnerable and share your experiences with us, we are grateful. The strength and hope you show above the pain, frustration, anger, confusion, and numbness is a gift. It takes courage to unmask the fairy tale and expose the cracks, the faulty foundation, the blood, sweat, and tears shed to be seen as fully human. Your bravery, your contributions, your gifts have not gone unnoticed. You are beautiful and whole right now. It is the brokenness in the world that makes us believe that we are less than others. My inner spirit wrote, "We have spent our whole lives watching you, seeing your accomplishments, living the way we think you want us to. We have watched the way you move, you talk, you think. We have listened to your story and learned your history. We have sat patiently as you explained your politics, your religion, your philosophy of life. We have walked with you on a journey of faith, waiting for our turn to share, to explain, to lead. Look at us. We are brown and you are white, but we are beautiful. Look at our faces, our hair, our clothes. They may be different, but aren't they worthy of your gaze? Look at your walk, the way our hips sway to the music in our souls, the way our proud necks tilt towards the sun. Yes, look at us. Look at our darkness. It contains light, love, rebirth, and grow. Look at our pain. Don't turn away. Look at the way you see us. We are human, have tears and fears. We have laughter and joy. Look at us. and walk with us. We too are beautiful. So my question to all of you is, did you listen? Did you really listen to what was being said? Did you listen to the experiences, the pain, the struggle, the anger, and not start thinking about what you had to do next or where you'd rather be? Did you take in another person's story and not try to fix it, explain it away, excuse it? Did you say even once in your head, I can't believe that happened? You must have misunderstood. You're reading into the situation. That couldn't have happened here. You're lying. Did you judge the story, the lives that were shared, or did you just let them in and accept them as a new view of the world, the Cape, the community in which we live? I was asked to speak about some next steps, about how do we move forward from where we are. But I think we all need to understand, really understand where we are. We live in a world where many women and men and children of color are afraid of the very people who are supposed to protect us. We live in a world where people who protect us can shoot us, arrest us, assault us, and murder us with impunity. We live in a world where white supremacists are protected and encouraged by the highest office in our country. We live in a world where it's not safe to protest the injustices that happen in our communities and to our families. We live in a world where members of our community are being picked up, detained, imprisoned, deported. We live in a world where once hard-fought, won rights like the right to vote are being dismantled. We live in a world where the school-to-prison pipeline is given more attention and funding than the effort to help our children get into universities or get good-paying jobs. We live in a world where people of color, as we just heard, are paid much less than our white counterparts. We live in a world where structures and systems were designed to keep people of color from being empowered, from being recognized as full citizens worthy of equal justice. We live in a world that seeks to divide us in order to keep us from uniting. We live in a world where only one true story is heard, the white story. That story is where we can begin to address how we move forward. The main narrative in our country has always been that of white people, particularly wealthy and powerful white people. This white narrative has left our native peoples out, who were here long before the white people came. It left out African Americans and black people of the diaspora. It left out Asians and Pacific Islanders. It left out Latinos and Latinas. We need to spend some time decentering the white story, and letting other narratives speak. And I don't mean for just 1 month out of the year. The Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, an African-American president of Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, writes, "There are so many American stories, yet so many of us only know 1 or 2 versions. So many of us think our stories are mutually exclusive. The story of the native people whose land we were wrested from versus the story of white settlers who moved across the Great Plains. The story of African Americans cruelly separated from their native homes versus the story of the Southern planters who used slave labor to build their wealth. The story of immigrants who fled their homelands for the sake of a distant promise versus those American families who seem always to have been here. And there are stories of those whose American history is nothing like the stories above. Stories of people who feel torn by what often seems like interests not their own. The first step, I feel, to healing the racial divide, to moving forward, is having our narrative, people of color stories, centered. Our histories lifted up, learned, and our notables honored. And not just the one that white people can accept, not just Martin Luther King. The next step for me is to look at white privilege and how it affects the view of our world, and knowingly and unknowingly how we participate in the racism that has been ingrained in our culture and our institutions. Now, for those of you who don't know, white privilege is the idea that we have benefits, advantages, opportunities, and freedoms simply by being born white and raised in a white-dominated society. Now, I know it's hard for people to believe, to accept that being white, you don't have to deal with the disproportionate impact of police brutality, racial profiling, and exclusion from everyday social settings that people of color do. Now, my final thought is, do you have friends who are people of color? Do you have a community of color to which you are accountable? I want to tell you a story. My father-in-law, Jim, was best friends with a white man, Bob, for over 70 years. Now, Jim and Bob grew up in Culver, Indiana, where they both lived until Bob's death a few years ago. They often hunted and fished together, and Jim, who's a morning person, would arrive at the crack of dawn to get Bob up. Bob, however, was not a morning person, and at times would want to sleep just a little bit longer. So Jim would jump into bed with him and go to sleep. This is what I mean by friendship. This is a friendship that has lasted through Jim Crow, Southern Indiana segregation, war, civil rights, and Black power. You and I don't know each other well enough, and we have not yet formed a bond of trust I believe must be present in order to sustain relationships through the honesty and true dialogue about racism. I believe we must get to the point where maintaining our relationships are more important than the hurt, the fear, the anger that is involved in true exchange. The first thing we have so often failed to do is build bridges, bridges of friendship, bridges of relationship, of trust, honesty, and accountability. This is what's so hard. People of color and white people learning to trust one another, to be with one another, to care for one another. Now again, when I talk about friendship, I don't mean the person in your building that you say hello to. I don't mean your cleaning woman, your gardener, the member of your association of university women or retired persons, or your children's teacher, the newspaper guy you say hello to every morning. In building relationships, accountability with communities of color, it's important also that you don't just go into the community and say, here I am, let me take charge. Be a guest. Be invited to share. Ask what is needed. Don't just make assumptions. Be a follower and empower others to lead. And finally, I want to talk about something Dr. King said. What I believe makes Reverend Dr. King stand out is that he recognized the interdependence of all life, and for a brief moment in history was able to tap into the populace's psyche and bring that connection alive. We are caught, he preached, in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He stoked the web he knew to be alive and united younger people and older people, rich and poor, Black, Native, Asian, Latino, Latina, and white, Christian, Unitarian, Jewish, Muslim, Democrats and Republicans and independents. It's up to us to keep that connection alive or build that connection where there is none. The question I leave you with is, what will you do now? Now that you have listened, now that you have heard how to begin, what will you do now? Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our program, and I had all sorts of closing things to say, but I would like to leave with those words echoing in our heads. If you'd like to join us at Engage Falmouth, we have a Facebook page where we announce these kinds of events. We plan to do workshops in the future. There'll be No Place for Hate has been telling me about unconscious bias training. That's another good step. And thank you all for coming and for listening and for sharing. We're going to close out with some more music from Donna. And please talk to your neighbors, meet each other. We all live here together. It's our community. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like you to take a look at this blanket before you leave, and we're all going to sing a song before you go, so let's hold off on the talking. This blanket I received from the Wampanoag children. It's called the Elder's Circle of Life, and it has the red and yellow, black and white colors of the four people. Black Elk Speaks, a book from the Lakota elder, had a dream. And the elders are teaching us that we're reweaving this dream now. We're coming back together as one whole circle. So one of my wonderful teachers, the great Babatunde Olatunji, this is he inspired this song. It's called One Spirit. And this is my dear friend Tara Murphy from Cape Cod African Drum and Dance. She's keeping the beat alive really strong on Cape Cod. She's going to help me out. And I have an extra drum here. Would you like to drum? No? So all you have to do, this is a chant. This song is a chant. Oh, there we go. And you sing, this little girl's going to help. We are all one spirit. Sing it. We are all one spirit. Take a deep breath into your nose. We are all one spirit. Come on, everybody. You can do it. Let's raise our voices. We are all one spirit. You're going to keep singing that. One spirit. Follow Tara. Living on the earth. We all have a place in the circle of life, which has given us birth. We are all one spirit. We are all one tribe. If we can open up our hearts to the love of humankind, we are all one spirit, one consciousness, one mind. If we can open up our hearts to the love of humankind, we are all one spirit. No matter what race, color, or creed, or religion you choose to believe in, we all have the same basic needs. We are all one spirit. In the sound of the drums you can hear it. Different rhythms but one beat. In our hands and in our feet. To the heart of the earth we pray that there will come a brighter day when everyone can truly say that we are all one spirit. Everyone, we are all one spirit. Come on, louder. Living on the earth, we are all one spirit. Living on the earth, we are all one spirit. Living on the earth, here we go. We are all one spirit. Living on the earth. Let's keep the spirit alive. Spread the love. What's your name? Chase. Let's hear it for Chase. Yeah.
right. Spread the vibe.